The day I found my husband's secret phone, I thought I'd discovered an affair. I had no idea the truth was so much worse. My name is Emma. I'm 34 years old, and I've been married to David for 9 years. We have 2 beautiful daughters, ages 6 and 8. For almost a decade, I thought I knew everything about the man I married. I was wrong about all of it. Like, subscribe, and stay with me for this unbelievable true story. David and I met in college during our junior year. He was studying finance, I was in marketing, and we clicked instantly at a mutual friend's party. He was charming, ambitious, and incredibly attentive. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. He'd surprise me with my favorite coffee, remember every little detail I mentioned, and made me feel like the center of his universe. When he proposed 2 years after graduation, I didn't hesitate for a second. He felt like home. Our wedding was perfect, small and intimate, just close family and friends. We bought a modest house in the suburbs, nothing fancy, but it was ours. David landed a great job at an investment firm, and I worked at a local marketing agency. When our first daughter, Lily, was born, I decided to go part-time to focus on being a mom. 3 years later, Sophie came along, and life felt complete. We had everything I'd ever dreamed of. David was a good husband, or at least that's what I believed. He worked long hours, but he always made time for family dinners and weekend activities with the girls. He'd coach Lily's soccer team on Saturdays and never missed a school event. Our friends called us the perfect couple, and honestly, I thought we were. Sure, we had our disagreements like any married couple, but nothing major. Nothing that made me question us. The first real crack appeared about 8 months ago. David started coming home later than usual, sometimes not until 9 or 10 at night. When I asked about it, he'd say the firm was going through a busy period, lots of new clients, big deals closing. It made sense. His job had always been demanding. But then I noticed he'd started keeping his phone face down on the table, something he'd never done before. He'd also shower immediately after getting home, every single night, which seemed odd, but not alarming enough to confront him about. Then came the business trips. David had traveled for work before, maybe once or twice a year, but suddenly he was gone every other week. Chicago, Boston, Atlanta, sometimes just overnight, sometimes for 3 or 4 days. I trusted him completely, so I never questioned it. I should have. One Tuesday evening in March, David left his personal phone at home when he went to the gym. His work phone, which he always carried, was with him, but this other phone, an older iPhone I'd seen him use occasionally, was charging on his nightstand. I wasn't snooping, not intentionally. I was putting away laundry when I heard it buzz with a text notification. The screen lit up, and I glanced at it without thinking. The preview message made my blood run cold. It said, "Can't wait to see you this weekend, baby. The kids are so excited about the zoo." Kids? What kids? My hands were shaking as I picked up the phone. It was locked, but I knew David's passcode because we'd always been open about that kind of thing. Or so I thought. I tried our anniversary, his birthday, the girls' birthdays. Nothing worked. He'd changed it. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at that phone, my mind racing through every possible explanation. Maybe it was a joke from a coworker. Maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe I'd misread it. But deep down, I knew. I knew something was terribly wrong. When David came home from the gym 40 minutes later, I was waiting in the kitchen with the phone on the counter between us. He walked in, sweaty and smiling, and froze the moment he saw it. The color drained from his face. I asked him calmly who'd sent that text. He stammered, said it must be spam, that he barely used that phone anymore. I told him to unlock it and show me. He refused. That's when I knew for certain. My husband was hiding something massive. We argued for hours that night. I demanded the truth, and he kept deflecting, saying I was overreacting, that I was invading his privacy. Privacy, as if 9 years of marriage meant nothing. Finally, around 2 a.m, exhausted and desperate, I told him I'd take the phone to someone who could unlock it if he wouldn't. That broke him. He sat down at the kitchen table, put his head in his hands, and started crying. And then he told me everything. David had another family, a whole other life I knew nothing about. 7 years ago, about 2 years into our marriage, he'd started an affair with a woman named Rachel, who worked at his firm. It began as a typical office romance, late nights working together, too many drinks at company events. All the cliches I never thought would happen to us. When Rachel got pregnant, David panicked. He told her he was married, but promised he'd support the child financially. Rachel agreed to keep the pregnancy quiet, and David started sending her money every month. Money I never knew about, because he'd opened a separate bank account I had no access to. Their son, Jacob, was born 6 months before our daughter, Sophie. But it didn't end there. David continued seeing Rachel. Not constantly, but regularly enough that their relationship evolved into something more than just co-parenting. 3 years after Jacob was born, Rachel had another baby, a daughter named Maya. Both of them were David's children. For 7 years, my husband had been living a double life. While I was at home raising Lily and Sophie, packing school lunches and organizing play dates, he was spending weekends with Rachel, Jacob, and Maya. The business trips were never business. They were family vacations with his other family. He'd been supporting 2 households, 2 sets of children, 2 completely separate lives, all while lying to my face every single day. The late nights weren't work. The changed passcode wasn't about privacy. Everything was a carefully constructed lie. I felt like the floor had opened up beneath me. How could I have been so blind? I replayed every moment of the past 7 years in my head, searching for signs I'd missed. And suddenly, they were everywhere. The unexplained withdrawals from our joint account he'd explained away as work expenses. The times he'd volunteer to run errands on weekends and be gone for hours. The new cologne he'd started wearing that I'd complimented, thinking he'd bought it for me. He'd bought it for her. I asked David if he loved Rachel. He said he didn't know. He said he loved me, loved our girls, but he also cared about Rachel and felt responsible for Jacob and Maya. Responsible. As if accidentally building a second family was just some obligation he'd stumbled into. I told him to get out. That night, immediately. He begged me to let him stay, to work through it, to go to counseling. I screamed at him that there was nothing to work through, that he'd destroyed everything, that I couldn't even look at him. He packed a bag and left before the sun came up. The girls woke up that morning asking where Daddy was. I told them he had an emergency work trip. I didn't know what else to say. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely function. I'd walk through the house we'd built together and see reminders of him everywhere. Photos on the walls, his coffee mug in the cabinet, his handwriting on the grocery list stuck to the fridge. Everything felt like a lie. I called my sister Jessica and told her everything. She drove over immediately and stayed with me for a week, helping with the girls, making sure I ate, holding me while I cried. She urged me to see a lawyer right away, to protect myself financially and legally before David had a chance to hide assets or complicate things further. I knew she was right, but I could barely think straight enough to make that call. Finally, 5 days after David left, I met with a divorce attorney named Patricia. She was kind but direct, and she walked me through what this would look like. First, we'd need full financial disclosure. That meant bank statements, tax returns, investment accounts, everything. She warned me that David's financial support of another family could complicate our divorce settlement, especially if he'd been using marital assets to fund that second household. He had. Patricia helped me file for divorce and requested a temporary support order. We froze joint accounts and started digging through years of financial records. What we found was staggering. Over 7 years, David had funneled more than $300,000 to Rachel and their children. Money from our savings, from bonuses he'd never told me about, from a secret investment account I didn't know existed. We'd struggled to save for the girls' college funds, delayed renovations on our house, and skipped family vacations because David said we needed to be careful with money. Meanwhile, he was spending a fortune on his other family. I felt sick. I felt betrayed in ways I didn't even know were possible. It wasn't just the affair or the secret children. It was the calculated deception, the years of lies, the deliberate theft of our shared future. David tried to contact me constantly. Texts, emails, voicemails. He said he was sorry, that he'd made terrible mistakes, that he wanted to fix things. He said he'd end things with Rachel, focus only on our family, do whatever it took. But it was too late. He'd already made his choices, over and over, for 7 years. About 3 weeks after everything came out, David's parents called me. They'd found out what happened, and his mother was devastated. She apologized profusely, said she'd raised him better than this, that she couldn't believe her son had done something so cruel. She asked if there was any way we could reconcile, for the sake of the girls. I told her I loved her, but no, there was no coming back from this. Then came the hardest part, telling Lily and Sophie. They were so young, too young to understand the full truth, but old enough to know something was very wrong. I sat them down one Saturday morning and explained, as gently as I could, that Mommy and Daddy weren't going to be married anymore, that sometimes grown-ups can't stay together, but that it had nothing to do with them, and that both Daddy and I loved them more than anything. They cried, I cried. It was the worst conversation I've ever had. David started seeing the girls every other weekend, supervised at first because I didn't trust him not to bring them around Rachel and the other children. He agreed to keep his two families separate, at least until the divorce was finalized, and we figured out how to handle that situation long term. I still don't know how we'll ever handle it. The divorce process dragged on for months. There were depositions, mediation sessions, court hearings. Rachel got involved at one point, trying to claim that David owed her household more financial support since she'd been relying on him for years. The audacity was breathtaking. My attorney fought hard for me. She argued that David had committed financial infidelity, that he'd stolen from our marital estate to support an affair and illegitimate children, and that I was entitled to compensation for that. The judge agreed. In the final settlement, I received the house, full custody of the girls, with David getting standard visitation, 70% of our remaining shared assets, and a significant amount of monthly child support and alimony. It didn't fix anything, but at least it was something. The financial compensation helped, but the emotional damage was harder to measure. I started seeing a therapist twice a week, trying to process the betrayal and rebuild my sense of self. For months, I felt like a failure. I blamed myself for not seeing the signs, for trusting him so completely, for being so naive. My therapist kept reminding me that none of this was my fault, that David's choices were his own, but it was hard to believe. Slowly, painfully, I started to heal. I focused on the girls, on making our home a stable, loving place for them, despite everything that had happened. I went back to work full-time, partly because I needed the money, and partly because I needed something that was mine, something David hadn't touched. My coworkers were supportive, and throwing myself into projects helped distract me from the constant ache. I also started reconnecting with old friends I'd lost touch with over the years. Women who'd been bridesmaids at my wedding, college roommates I hadn't seen in ages, neighbors I'd only ever chatted with at the mailbox. They rallied around me, invited me to book clubs and yoga classes and girls' nights out. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. Not just someone's wife or someone's mother, but Emma. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into David at Lily's school talent show. We'd been managing to avoid each other mostly, coordinating pickups and drop-offs through text. But this time, we were both there for the same event. He looked tired, older somehow. He asked if we could talk, and reluctantly, I agreed to meet him for coffee the following week. We sat across from each other at a cafe, and he apologized again. He said he'd been in therapy too, trying to understand why he'd done what he'd done, and that he was committed to being a better father to all 4 of his children. He said Rachel had left him, that she couldn't forgive him for choosing to give me the majority of the assets in the divorce, and that he was living alone now, seeing Jacob and Maya on a limited schedule. I felt nothing when he told me that. No satisfaction, no pity, just emptiness. He asked if there was any chance someday that we could be friends for the sake of Lily and Sophie. I told him honestly that I didn't know, that I'd work on being civil, on co-parenting effectively, but that friendship felt like too much to ask. He nodded and said he understood. That conversation gave me closure I didn't know I needed. Seeing David so clearly for who he was, not the idealized version I'd built up in my mind, helped me let go of the last pieces of anger I'd been holding on to. He wasn't a monster, but he also wasn't the man I'd thought I married. He was just deeply flawed, selfish, and weak. And that was his problem, not mine. It's been almost a year now since everything fell apart. The girls are doing better. They've adjusted to the new normal, splitting time between two homes, and they're back to their happy, energetic selves most days. Lily even told me recently that she's glad we're not fighting anymore, that the house feels peaceful now. That broke my heart and healed it at the same time. As for me, I'm still rebuilding. Some days are harder than others. There are moments when I see a happy couple at the grocery store or watch a romantic movie and feel that familiar ache, the loneliness of realizing I have to start over completely. But there are also moments of unexpected joy, moments when I'm laughing with my daughters or crushing a project at work or sitting on the porch with a glass of wine watching the sunset, and I realize I'm okay. More than okay, actually. I'm free. I've learned so much about myself through this nightmare. I've learned that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible, that I can survive betrayal and heartbreak and still show up for my kids every single day, that I don't need someone else to complete me or make me feel worthy. I'm enough, all on my own. I've also learned to trust my instincts. Looking back, there were so many red flags I ignored because I wanted to believe the best in David, because I didn't want to seem paranoid or controlling. I'll never ignore my gut again. And most importantly, I've learned that my worth isn't defined by someone else's choices. David's betrayal doesn't mean I'm unlovable or foolish or broken. It means he made terrible decisions that hurt people he claimed to love. That's on him, not me. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe someday I'll be ready to date again, to trust someone new with my heart. Or maybe I'll focus on my daughters and my career and building a life that's rich and full, even without a partner. Either way, I know I'll be okay, because I've already survived the worst thing I could imagine, and I came out the other side. If this story touched you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and which moment hit you the most. Thank you for listening.